Welcome back to the deep dive. So, here we are, the end of the road.
The final chapter.
For months, we've been charting this whole collapse of shared reality. We've been tracking what we call the trust crash.
Right. This fragmentation of credibility that just seems to define everything now.
Exactly. We've looked at how geopolitics and recommendation algorithms basically collide to create this world where, even the most fundamental truth is suddenly up for debate.
And today, we finally get to the most, well, baffling part of the whole story.
Yeah.
The so-called solutions.
Yeah, the solutions. And you'd think, wouldn't you, that they'd involve some big societal reset, maybe, I don't know, rethinking the whole attention economy.
You would hope so. But what the research actually shows us is this overwhelming commitment to what you could only call the grand paradox.
And that paradox is what you... Exactly.
It's the idea that we are trying to solve a crisis that was fundamentally caused by technology, by its scale, its speed, its sophistication.
By using even more technology, with even more scale, more speed, and just wildly more sophistication.
It's not just doubling down. It's like trying to apply an algorithmic cure to an algorithmic disease. It feels completely circular.
That's it. We've outsourced so much complexity to these optimization engines, and now we have to deploy these just staggering financial and computational resources just to build countermeasures.
All to maintain this illusion that we're still in control of the machine.
So our mission today, with this final deep dive, is to really unpack the mechanics of this recursive fix. We're going to go deep on the two main strategies being deployed.
First, there's the massive AI counteroffensive. This is being funded globally, but especially by the European Union.
And second, the human element. The fragile, overworked infrastructure of global fact-checking. And we're going to look at the circular logic that honestly seems to undermine both of them.
It really is the high-level dilemma of our time. The market demands this constant efficiency, right? And technology delivers it. But it often comes at the expense of, well, social cohesion.
And the foundational architecture of the internet, it's still just geared toward one thing: optimizing for attention.
Which means any fix you propose has to be exponentially more complex and more expensive than the simple little optimization loops that broke the system in the first place.
The analogy I just cannot get out of my head is this. It's like we're witnessing an attempt to solve a societal fast food addiction, that deep foundational craving for instant, frictionless digital gratification.
Okay.
But instead of trying to improve the quality of the food, the sustenance, we're building an even faster, more complicated app powered by machine learning that just precisely tracks all your nutritional failures.
You're still eating the junk food.
Exactly. The underlying structural craving, that impulse for speed and ease, it remains completely supreme.
And that technological cost, it gets socialized.
Yeah.
We're all paying for it, either with our attention, which is the currency they want, or with our taxes that are now funding these multi-million euro AI defense systems.
The cost of running the broken machine is now being matched by the cost of running the repair crew. It's insane.
It is.
So as we stand here about to delve into the digital ethics of fighting fire with computational fire, I have to ask the essential, maybe the existential question.
Go on.
Given the sheer scale of this global information disorder, is there an actual adult in the room? Is anyone managing this massive, sprawling regulatory and technological strategy? Is there cohesive governance anywhere?
Well, let me see.
I'm waiting.
I'm hearing, yes. I'm hearing the distinct sound of a printer firing up to print a single, very dense sheet of bureaucratic regulations.
Okay.
And it is immediately jammed.
Of course it has.
And that sound is followed by the distant, cheerful whirring of a Roomba vacuum cleaner announcing commencing randomized trajectory sequence.
Okay, so the Roomba is in charge.
Right.
That actually explains a lot about the randomized trajectory of our solutions.
It does, doesn't it? But look, before we can even begin to assess how effective the fixes are, we have to revisit the diagnosis. We have to be really clear on the algorithmic disease itself.
And the core failure, especially on a platform like YouTube, it all comes back to one thing.
The recommender system. It's been studied to death. And the results are, well, they're not ambiguous.
Well, we've talked about the rabbit hole effect before in this series, but some of the data on the system's actual culpability is just, it's startling.
It really is. There was a huge systematic review that looked at 23 different studies, all focused on how problematic content spreads online.
And what did it find?
A stunning 14 of those 23 studies explicitly implicated the YouTube recommender system in facilitating access to damaging material.
So it's not just that the bad content exists, the platform's own mechanism is actively promoting it.
Precisely. And that one statistic, it just fundamentally dismantles what I call the autonomy myth.
The idea that users are 100% responsible for what they click on, what they browse, the whole personal responsibility argument.
Exactly. The data shows the system isn't some passive catalog. It's not a library. It's an active agent in the process.
An agent with its own goals.
Yes. The recommender system, operating completely independently of what you search for or subscribe to, is directly responsible for about 30% of all video views on the platform.
30%. Just stop and think about that. Nearly a third of all consumption on one of the world's largest media platforms is driven by the internal logic of a machine just trying to maximize attention.
That is an immense amount of structural power.
Yeah.
And it's exactly why these content pathways lead so reliably toward echo chambers and filter bubbles.
Yeah.
The algorithm couldn't care less about truth or nuance or, social good.
It cares about watch time. That's the only metric.
That's the prime directive. And
Yeah.
that is the core flaw in its optimization function. Because, let's be honest, moderate, factual, nuanced content.
The kind of stuff that actually fosters consensus and critical thought.
Yes, that stuff is inherently less engaging in algorithmic terms than extreme or shocking or conspiratorial content. Novelty, outrage, certainty, those are the high-margin attention traps.
So the system, when you just leave it to its own devices to optimize for engagement,
It inevitably, mathematically, nudges users down these pathways of radicalization.
and these pathways, they aren't just about, geopolitical extremism. The research shows it's a whole spectrum.
Oh, absolutely. It ranges from the political extremes, both left and right, to the pseudoscientific, like flat earth content. It even gets into the outright bizarre and then darker stuff, like incel-related content.
Which is this vein of extreme misogyny that's often linked with alt-right ideology.
It is a truly multidimensional problem,
Mm-hmm.
and the real-world consequences are, well, they're horrifyingly concrete. We found that one anecdotal example that just illustrates the entire journey perfectly.
You're talking about the case of Buckley Wolf.
Yes, that example is the ultimate summation of what happens when optimized engagement goes catastrophically wrong.
Walk us through that journey again, because it honestly sounds like something out of a science fiction movie. It doesn't sound real.
It doesn't. So, Buckley Wolf, he was a man in his mid-20s. He allegedly committed an incredibly violent crime against his own family. And his reported belief was that his brother was a shape-shifting alien reptile.
A reptile, okay?
So when journalists and researchers traced his digital consumption, his initial likes and subscriptions were all focused on pretty innocuous stuff.
Like,
Martial arts, fitness training, general self-improvement videos, things you or I might watch.
completely harmless, even productive content.
Exactly. But then the system kicked in. The recommendation engine started to work, and the platform began subtly shifting him towards alt-right figures. Then a little deeper, into general conspiracy theories.
And specifics.
Specifically those involving reptilian overlords. And then finally into extreme alt-right content. And the key here is that this wasn't really a conscious choice he made at each step. It was a calculated nudge.
Based entirely on maximizing his engagement time.
The algorithm identified that he was susceptible to novel, high-arousal content. It didn't care about its factual basis. And it just fed him more and more of it until that content became his operational reality.
So you start with optimized martial arts videos, and you end with a literal belief in reptilian overlords and real-world violence. That is a chilling feedback loop.
It shows the true cost of prioritizing clicks over humanity. And, it gets even worse when you actually try to fight the system from within it.
How so?
Well, we have research showing the perverse effect of counter-messaging. These are videos created by public interest groups, NGOs, even governments, specifically designed to de-radicalize people or debunk extremist narrative.
The good guys trying to inject some truth into the system.
Right. And the algorithm decided to use those good intentions as a roadmap to the bad stuff.
You're kidding. How?
Well, the studies found that when a user watched an anti-extremist or a counter-narrative video, the recommender system just registered a high level of interest in the topic of extremism.
It didn't understand the intent of the video.
Not at all. It just saw the key words. And so the system would then place that user closer to actual radical content within just 1 or 2 clicks.
That's terrifying. That is like installing a firewall on your computer that says, oh, I see you're interested in stopping viruses. Here are the 10 most exciting new viruses for you to check out.
That's a perfect analogy. The platform's structural risk, which is designed from the ground up to keep eyeballs glued to the screen, it just overrides the content's positive intentions.
So any attempt to engage with the problem, even to fix it, is just interpreted by the optimization engine as confirmation of a deep interest in the topic's most radical fringes.
Which really highlights that the problem isn't just about content moderation. You can't just delete bad videos. The problem is the fundamental structure of the information delivery mechanism itself.
So, moving beyond this sort of individual radicalization, this digital disease is clearly having a massive impact on our shared consensus on electoral integrity. It's operating at a global scale.
Absolutely. And for that, we can look at the studies of the Chilean plebiscite, which were conducted in 2022 and 2023.
These big democratic processes, they're the primary targets, right?
They're high-value targets for intentional disinformation campaigns, precisely because the outcome determines shared governance for millions of people.
So what did the study find about the delivery mechanism during this really critical electoral moment?
The researchers analyzed 237 verified cases of disinformation, and the data was just crystal clear.
Where was it spreading?
85.2% of those cases circulated primarily on social media. Not a huge surprise, but it's the format that's interesting. The preferred format wasn't some dense article or a detailed video.
It's an image.
It was a photo, accounting for nearly 40% of the total. Low cost, incredibly high shareability, maximum impact.
Quick, dirty, and viral. So who is creating all this noise? Is it foreign actors, political parties?
And this is where the complexity really shows. The vast majority of the source material, 84% of it, was deemed diffuse.
Meaning what? Untraceable.
Untraceable, unknown, or spreading so fast across closed messaging apps like WhatsApp and anonymous accounts that you just can't find the origin point. Public figures, by contrast, were only responsible for about 11% of the total volume.
But their amplification power must be immense.
Of course. But the point is, we are mostly fighting a kind of digital smog. It's chaos that originates in darkness, and it's designed from the start to be untraceable.
And the consequence of all this, as the researchers point out, is what they call the truth a la carte effect.
Yes. Because these algorithms are so good at reinforcing our confirmation bias, consumers are just. They're no longer sharing a common set of facts. They're building their own custom version of reality.
A reality where the value of getting attention completely supersedes any requirement for it to be factually true.
We're literally ordering our reality, curated and served up by a machine. And if you happen to prefer the version where an election was stolen or, the world is secretly run by ancient lizard people,
then the system is more than happy to maximize your time with that high margin content. It's not a bug, it's a feature. It's the feature we all paid for with our attention.
and that creates an incredibly dangerous societal condition. I mean, if two people receive fundamentally different inputs for years and years on end, the very possibility of shared democratic goals or even just shared social discourse, it just completely erodes.
The reality you consume becomes the reality you inhabit.
And there's no bridge between them.
Okay, so the diagnosis is confirmed. The patient is sick. Algorithms are breaking down our shared reality at scale. We are officially in a computational crisis.
Right.
So the solution, therefore, must also be computational. Which brings us to the supranational response, particularly from the European Union. They seem to have recognized that only massive, dedicated resources can fight back against this engine of disruption.
The EU response is really significant, mainly because they recognized early on that this threat transcends individual national borders.
The platforms are global.
The platforms they're trying to regulate, Google, Meta, and so on, they're transnational giants. So you need supranational regulation and, crucially, massive financial backing to have any hope. And they're getting that through programs like Horizon Europa.
They're committing billions to this fight.
Billions. And they're not just pouring that money into old institutions. They're investing very heavily in cutting-edge AI, designed specifically to fight the next generation of deepfakes and manipulation.
Okay, let's talk about these specific technological messiahs that the EU is funding.
That's a good way to put it. The strategy is absolutely to deploy next-generation AI against the most sophisticated techniques that malicious actors are using right now. And we can look at 3 representative projects that really show this intense reliance on technology.
All right, give us the first one, the one focused on the professional frontline.
Okay, that would be a project called AI Code. This project received about 5 million euros in funding. Its objective is critical: to equip media professionals. We're talking journalists, editors, investigators with new AI services and tools.
But tools for what, specifically?
And this is the key part. These tools are designed to detect new forms of content manipulation.
That distinction, new forms, that feels really telling. It implies they aren't just trying to catch yesterday's cheap Photoshops, they're trying to anticipate the next generation of undetectable fakes.
That's exactly it. They're betting on AI to identify patterns and subtle inconsistencies that a human eye or even first-generation tools would completely miss, especially in a high-volume, real-time news environment.
So it's a digital shield for the people who have to publish information under immense pressure.
It's a fundamental acknowledgement that the speed of manipulation now completely outstrips the speed of human verification. It has to be machine versus machine.
And while AI code is targeting the professionals, the next project, AI for Debunk, that's aimed at the citizens, at us.
Yes, AI for Debunk, funded with about 4.9 million euros, is focused on creating 4 different human-centric AI interfaces to help ordinary people navigate media safely.
And what are these interfaces?
It includes a smartphone app, a web plugin for your browser, a collaborative platform, and an augmented reality interface.
Hold on, an augmented reality interface. We need an AR tool just to safely browse the internet now. That sounds less like a solution, more like a massive white flag.
Well,
It sounds like an admission that the baseline functionality of the internet has completely and utterly failed.
it really does highlight the absurdity of the current informational environment, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It suggests that the platforms themselves can't be trusted to deliver safe content, and citizens can't be expected to maintain vigilance without constant technological assistance.
So is this a viable defense? Or is it just an abdication of platform responsibility? Are we just shifting the entire cognitive and financial burden of vigilance onto the consumer?
Forcing you to download a digital bodyguard just to look at your newsfeed.
It feels like if the government had to issue everyone a mandatory AI-powered filter mask, just so they could safely walk down the street because the air pollution caused by private industry was just totally unchecked.
The platform created the pollution, but you have to buy and maintain the mask.
Precisely. And this technological arms race, it escalates even further when we look at the most sophisticated threat of all, ultra-falsification.
And that's where the third project, Solaris, comes in. It secured 2.8 million euros, and its mandate is highly specialized. It's about analyzing and developing innovations to mitigate the risks posed by generative adversarial networks.
JANs.
JANs.
This is a really critical point that needs expansion. We hear these terms, deepfake, ultra-falsification, thrown around constantly. But for you listening, what exactly are JANs, and why do they make fakes so much harder to spot than older methods?
Right, so JANs are the core engine behind today's hyper-realistic fakes. The way they work is, it's literally a two-part system. It's an adversarial network.
Two AIs fighting each other.
In a sense, yes. You have a generator, which is an AI that creates the fake content, a video, an image, a voice clip. Then you have a discriminator, a second AI network, and its only job is to determine if the content the generator made is real or fake.
So the generator is constantly trying to fool the discriminator.
Constantly. They're in this perpetual competition. The generator gets better and better at creating realistic fakes because it gets instant feedback from the discriminator every time it fails. And at the same time, the discriminator gets better and better at spotting ever more subtle flaws.
And over hundreds of thousands of these cycles.
The resulting output becomes virtually indistinguishable from reality. That's the ultra-falsification we're talking about. It's not just stitching a face onto a video anymore. It's creating entirely new, contextually coherent, and near-perfect digital media from scratch.
So a project like Solaris is designed to find the specific, microscopic artifacts that even a JAN-trained eye would miss.
That's the goal. And this is where that recursive trap we talked about becomes a full-blown existential arms race.
It is the absolute pinnacle of the dilemma. We are using these ultra-sophisticated AI models, like Solaris, to try and combat the manipulative capabilities of other ultra-sophisticated AI models, the JANs.
The cost is astronomical, and the gap between offense and defense might only be a few months, maybe even weeks. The moment Solaris finds a flaw, the next generation of JANs patches it and becomes even better.
It's an escalating, unwinnable war of pure computational power.
It is.
It just makes the whole fight seem completely hopeless. It's like we're deploying this high-tech digital bodyguard that costs more than our entire GDP just to stop an undetectable digital phantom from convincing us the sky is purple.
And every time you upgrade the bodyguard, The Phantom simply upgrades its tactics.
And this computational escalation, it must have serious geopolitical implications too, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, who benefits from this kind of arms race? Only those who can afford the insane research and computational power.
Well-funded supranational bodies like the EU or giant technology corporations.
Exactly. And that leaves smaller, poorer nations, who are often the primary targets for disinformation campaigns, especially during their elections, completely defenseless against a sophisticated deepfake attack. They can't afford a Solaris.
So the computational solution is inherently inequitable. It protects the rich informational world while leaving the global south completely vulnerable to the exact same technology.
It broadens the divide. It weaponizes technology not just against truth, but against global equality. And while all this AI warfare is escalating in this very expensive automated sphere,
The messy, immediate fight against disinformation still relies on the fragile human frontline.
the fact-checkers.
Let's shift our focus to that human element, the fact-checking infrastructure. This whole industry, often accredited by organizations like the IFCN, is tasked with identifying objective truth and then disseminating it quickly enough to actually matter, it sounds.
Herculean. It is a critical piece of infrastructure, but it's one that is constantly stressed, underfunded, and often, deliberately maligned. The work itself, as it was detailed in those Chilean studies, is incredibly labor-intensive, especially during high-stakes events like a plebiscite.
What does that painstaking labor actually look like in practice when you're dealing with, say, a misleading photo that's been shared 10,000 times in an hour?
It involves meticulous, often very repetitive work. The fact-checkers have to review original official documents to confirm even basic facts. They have to consult experts in the relevant field. For instance, one of the Chilean fact-checkers, Mala Espina, they prefer that expert consultation approach.
And others.
Others, like FastCheck, they prioritize seeking the original source material. They'll do extensive reverse image searches to trace the origin of a photo or a meme to see if it's been taken out of context.
So it's basically investigative journalism, but conducted under the extreme time pressure of a viral news cycle. They're the digital triage unit for truth.
A very good way of putting it. And the researchers who document this work, they're the first to acknowledge its inherent fragility.
What are the main limitations?
Well, they cite the structural limitations. The sheer volume of disinformation means they can only ever focus on the most viral or the most egregious cases. Smaller, more localized disinformation campaigns often just slide by because there's a lack of resources. They also cite precarious work environments and, importantly, the subjective criteria used in selecting what content to verify in the first place.
And that subjectivity, that brings us directly to the crisis of legitimacy, doesn't it? The second you place the burden of defining truth onto a small group of human organizations, trust becomes incredibly fragile.
It does. And this is made so much worse by concerns over transparency, especially around funding and corporate links.
The perception of corporate influence is a huge vulnerability.
It is. Fact-checkers often enter into agreements with the major platforms, with Facebook or Google, for funding, for distribution, for technical support. And even if their independence is rigorously maintained in practice, that relationship creates a perceived conflict of interest.
Which their opponents can then weaponize immediately to compromise their legitimacy in the public eye.
Instantly, it's the first line of attack. You can't trust them, they're funded by big tech.
That makes perfect sense. But the research on the Spanish fact-checkers, specifically on an organization called Neutral, it reveals a much more insidious and subtle threat to their legitimacy than just external funding.
And that's the issue of selection bias.
Exactly.
This finding is profoundly important. It really shows the systemic difficulty of trying to maintain neutrality in a hyperpolarized environment.
So what did the research do?
They analyzed Neutral's verification of political claims over a 4-year period. And in one sense, the findings were encouraging. When it came to the final output, the execution phase and the final verdict Neutral maintained impartiality.
Meaning their ratings calling claims true or false or misleading, they weren't statistically skewed toward or against any specific political party.
That's right. The referee was calling the fouls fairly on both teams.
Okay.
But the bias clearly manifested in the very first step, the selection process. Neutral dedicated significantly greater attention to the discourse coming from conservative parties. Specifically, they were checking the claims of the Partido Popular far more frequently than those of their political opponents.
That's the definition of a tainted game. If the referee only ever chooses to check one team's players for illegal equipment, even if they call the fouls accurately when they find them, the entire perception of the competition is corrupted.
That's it, exactly. In an environment that's defined by this truth a la carte effect, where trust is already at rock bottom and personalization is everything, the perception of unfairness is often just as damaging as genuine bias.
So the mere choice of what to check, which might be driven by internal editorial criteria or what they see as most viral or harmful,
Inadvertently creates the appearance of a political agenda against one side. And that completely undermines their entire intended goal, which is to restore faith in objective verification.
and once that legitimacy is damaged by this perceived selection bias, politicians, of course, they rush in to exploit that vulnerability.
Which leads us straight into the political weaponization of disinformation.
And this is perfectly demonstrated by that Chilean political parody video ridiculing Minister Cataldo.
Yes, this wasn't some grassroots meme that went viral. This was a strategically produced political video, and it was promoted by the opposition UDI party. The content showed the Minister of Education supposedly neglecting his duties to go focus on campaigning for a rival presidential candidate.
So they weren't just cracking a political joke, they were aiming for maximum strategic disruption.
Their objective was highly specific. They wanted to create a political situation that would block the minister from joining the opposing campaign team. The video created this inescapable political catch-22.
How so?
Well, think about it. If Minister Cataldo left his ministry role to go campaign, then the video's central claim of neglect would be confirmed by his own actions.
And if he stayed?
If he stayed, the parody had still successfully framed all of his work as politically conflicted and inefficient. The narrative wins, regardless of the real-world outcome.
It's weaponizing perception itself to force a political outcome. And the hypocrisy loop is just the final twist of the knife. It demonstrates the complete lack of any single standard in the political sphere when it comes to truth.
The irony here is just stunning. The UDI party promoted this highly partisan, strategically misleading video almost immediately after their own party's candidate, Evelyn Matei, had publicly condemned what she called a filthy campaign of caricature and false claims that was being directed against her.
Wait, so they condemn the tactic when it harms them?
And then promote the exact same tactic just minutes later to harm an opponent.
It reveals this deep political nihilism at the very heart of the trust crash. Truth, in this environment, it's not a principle, it's just a commodity.
It's a tool to be strategically deployed or discarded or weaponized as needed. If the tactic achieves the strategic objective, blocking a rival, swaying an election, then the means are justified.
The very concept of a shared objective standard is just functionally dead in the political arena.
It appears so.
So, we have reached the culmination of our entire deep dive series, and frankly, the situation looks bleak. We've cataloged algorithms that send people toward a literal belief in reptilian overlords.
We have?
We've seen multi-billion-dollar AI attempting to fix the chaos that other AI created. We've seen human fact-checkers fighting against their own structural selection bias. And we have cynical politicians weaponizing the very tools they just condemned moments before.
A full picture.
So I must ask one final time, is there an actual functioning adult in the room with cohesive control over this escalating informational crisis? Anyone at all?
Hang on. The Roomba. It stopped moving.
What's it doing?
There's a small, distressed whirring sound. And then a faint mechanical voice says, "Error? Error, cannot locate charging dock. Structural integrity compromised. Commencing randomized trajectory sequence."
That sound. That is basically the sound of global governance right now. A confused robot, lost in the dark, wasting its last bit of battery life on a completely randomized trajectory.
I think that's fair. And given that the institutional and regulatory solutions seem to be locked in this expensive, computationally recursive loop.
This arms race that only favors the technologically and financially rich.
Exactly. The focus then has to shift entirely to the individual. Researchers are increasingly concluding that the only reliable defense left is internal.
What do they call?
Individual critical thought. They term it epistemic vigilance.
Epistemic vigilance. That sounds like a profound version. I mean, we are already overwhelmed by the pressure of work and rent and just choosing a streaming service. And now we also have to become amateur intelligence analysts just to browse Twitter.
What about the cognitive cost?
Exactly. The psychological cost of this enforced individual defense must be huge.
That is the essential hidden cost of the trust crash. We are forced into this constant state of hyper-awareness. You have to dedicate significant mental energy not just to processing information, but to constantly assessing the source, the intent, the format, and the context of every single piece of media you consume.
That cognitive load is exhausting. It has to lead to decision fatigue or polarization avoidance, where people just stop engaging with anything complex at all.
Or worse, outright cynicism and complete withdrawal from civic life.
It's a tax on the mind. The platforms get our attention for free, and we pay the psychological price of fighting their systemic manipulation.
Exactly. But amidst all that burden, the researchers do offer some incredibly simple, actionable advice to help fight back against algorithmic control.
I'm all ears.
It's all about creating friction. The smallest, but maybe the most powerful line of defense against the rabbit hole is simply choosing to deactivate autoplay on platforms like YouTube.
Force a conscious consumption choice. Inject a bit of friction back into the optimized machine.
Precisely. The power of the algorithm lies in its frictionless, continuous, passive flow. By deactivating autoplay, you force a moment of reflection. You impose a conscious decision.
Do I truly want to watch this next recommended thing?
Or should I maybe go read a book or call a friend or, God forbid, just stare out the window for a minute? That single moment of pause is what interrupts the attention maximization loop.
So we can choose to stop paying the attention tax, even if it's just one click at a time. The individual capacity to discern intentional falsehood disinformation from unintentional error misinformation and from harmless satire, that is the most robust, though exhausting, defense we have left.
It is the final call for personal sovereignty in the digital age.
Which brings us to the close of our series, and it demands a final and maybe, an intellectually nihilistic realization.
Go on.
We've spent this entire time dissecting these invisible, powerful forces that govern our modern lives. Optimization algorithms, coordinated disinformation strategies, the movement of global capital. And they feel as utterly inescapable as dealing with perpetually rising rent.
Or the crushing disappointment of dating apps.
Or the inevitability of your dishwasher breaking right before a holiday. The world has been optimized, and everything, including truth itself, has become fluid and commoditized. Its value is only as high as the attention it commands in the market.
A grim thought.
So we ask the final question. When the digital economy inevitably implodes, and maybe it will, when all the intangible assets, all the likes, the views, the crypto just disappear into the void, what truly remains?
What's left?
What are the truly hard assets? The things that cannot be manipulated by code or by market forces or by ultra-falsification?
The genuine human connections, that which is tactile and verifiable and nonpartisan.
Focus on what's real. Focus on the hard assets. Because in the end, the only thing the algorithm truly can't optimize or quantify or render obsolete is the value of friendship.
I'll agree with that.
And perhaps the ironclad certainty of a really solid, non-perishable can of preserved chickpeas in the back of your pantry. Just in case the AI wins the war of computational power and we all need to start over.
A verifiable, tangible, nonpartisan asset.
Impervious to selection bias.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Precisely. Thank you for joining us on this entire series of The Deep Dive. Deactivate your autoplay, stay vigilant, and maybe go buy some canned goods.